promise we will dip back into that in a moment, but we've got other breaking news out of Washington, D.C. The U.S. Supreme Court declining to block a New York grand jury from getting President Trump's personal and corporate tax returns. Pete Williams has the latest. Pete, explain this. Former President Trump's team has been trying to prevent this grand jury from seeing his taxes, and the Supreme Court said, sorry, Charlie, not going to happen?
Exactly right. You may remember earlier this year, the court said the president wasn't immune from the grand jury's investigative powers. So he went back to court a second time, arguing, OK, well, in this case, I'm saying the subpoena is overbroad. And today the Supreme Court said it would not hear his appeal of two lower court decisions that rejected that.
OK, so Trump's final defense just collapsed completely. A federal judge is preparing to deliver what legal experts are calling a devastating, defining ruling that destroys Trump's last major line of defense. And this isn't just one setback. This is comprehensive collapse. Judge Karen Immergut issued a bombshell ruling that Trump's deployment of the National Guard to Portland was illegal, not questionable, not problematic, illegal. And she issued a permanent injunction stopping it. That ruling strips away a core legal argument Trump's team has been using for years. The claim that Trump has immunity for official acts, that he can deploy military force without oversight, that his executive power is essentially unlimited. The judge said, no, that's wrong. That deployment was illegal. And Trump doesn't have unchecked executive power. That judicial rejection of Trump's core defense theory is what makes this a final collapse. Because if Trump doesn't have unlimited executive authority, then most of his defenses across all his cases fall apart. But before we go any further, real quick, let's be honest. You can't really trust mainstream media anymore. That's why we built Pump Politics, to bring you real stories, real context, and no corporate spin. If you want to stay ahead of the headlines, join our free newsletter. We'll send the news straight to your inbox every day. Just click the link in the description to join. And if you just want to support what we're doing, join us. Be part of the community that actually cares about the truth. All right, let's get back to the video. The specific finding that the National Guard deployment was illegal is based on detailed legal analysis. Federal law restricts when and how presidents can deploy military forces domestically. Trump apparently violated those restrictions, deployed forces without proper authorization, used them in ways that exceeded his authority, and the judge found all of that was illegal, not just improper, illegal. That finding has implications beyond just the Portland deployment, because if Trump illegally used military force there, he probably illegally used it in other places. Other deployments, other uses of federal forces, all potentially illegal under the same legal reasoning. The permanent injunction means Trump can't do this again, can't deploy forces to Portland or similar situations without following proper legal procedures. That injunction limits Trump's future actions.
Vance agreed to hold off on any demand for these documents until the Supreme Court has handled this case. You can bet that that is all ready to go. All they have to do is turn the key. Those demands will go to the accountants. The accountants are ready to turn it over. So I suspect this will be a matter of days.
So they're going to see it immediately. Can you give us more insight into what that means after that?
Well, the grand jury is going to have to decide whether these two new puzzle parts, if you will, they'll look at his taxes from the accountants.
Constrains his executive power, shows judges are willing to use their authority to stop illegal presidential conduct. The ruling slamming Trump's claims of unchecked executive power addresses Trump's fundamental approach to the presidency. Trump has operated as if he has unlimited authority, as if he can do whatever he wants without legal constraints. But judges are systematically rejecting that view, saying presidential power is limited, saying Trump has to follow laws like everyone else, saying unchecked executive authority is contrary to constitutional principles. That systematic judicial rejection of Trump's power claims is devastating because it means his entire approach to governance was wrong, was illegal. Courts calling out Trump's team for legal suicide refers to the self-destructive nature of their defense strategy by making extreme arguments about unlimited presidential power, by presenting fabricated or inconsistent evidence, by burning credibility with judges. Trump's lawyers have effectively destroyed their own case, have made it easier for judges to rule against Trump, have committed professional suicide by pursuing tactics that judges view as dishonest and legally baseless. The string of failed delay tactics shows Trump's strategy of postponing accountability isn't working anymore. Trump has tried every possible delay, every procedural maneuver, every appeal, But courts are catching on, are denying delays, are forcing proceedings forward, are saying no more excuses. The conflicting evidence apparently includes instances where Trump's team presented information that contradicted other information they'd presented, or where their claims were directly contradicted by documents. That inconsistency destroys credibility, makes judges skeptical of everything Trump's lawyers say, makes it easier to rule against Trump because judges don't believe his representations. The loss of credibility among Trump's lawyers is the cumulative effect of their tactics, each false statement, each inconsistency, each extreme argument, all adding up to judges viewing Trump's legal team as untrustworthy. And once judges don't trust you, you can't win cases because they'll scrutinize everything you say, will reject arguments that might have been accepted from trustworthy lawyers, will assume the worst about your motives and claims. The description of the judge concluding Trump's team committed legal suicide shows how bad the tactical decisions were. Lawyers are supposed to maintain credibility, supposed to make reasonable arguments, supposed to present consistent evidence. Trump's team did the opposite, made extreme arguments that judges rejected, presented inconsistent evidence that destroyed credibility, burned through any goodwill or benefit of doubt. That's professional suicide. The scathing remarks from the court apparently include strong language criticizing Trump's legal positions. Judges usually use measured language, usually avoid harsh criticism, but this judge apparently felt Trump's arguments were so extreme, his tactics so improper, that strong criticism was warranted. Those scathing remarks are part of the permanent record, will be read by other judges, will influence how courts view Trump's cases going forward. The warning of possible sanctions, lawyer disbarments, and direct criminal consequences shows judges are prepared to impose serious accountability, not just ruling against Trump, but punishing the lawyers who made false arguments, sanctioning them financially, referring them for disbarment, potentially even criminal prosecution if the misconduct was bad enough. That threat creates enormous pressure on Trump's remaining lawyers, makes them question whether continuing to represent Trump is worth the risk to their own careers and freedom. Legal observers calling this a historic turning point reflects the significance. This isn't just another ruling. This is the collapse of Trump's fundamental defense strategy, the rejection of his core claims about presidential power, the exposure of his legal team's tactics as self-destructive, all creating a moment where Trump's legal position fundamentally shifts from defendable to indefensible. All right, so let's dig into what specific defenses collapsed, what fabricated evidence was presented, and what comes next now that Trump's final defense has failed. The core defense that collapsed was Trump's claim of unlimited executive authority. Trump has been arguing across multiple cases that as president, he had essentially unlimited power, could deploy military forces however he wanted, could classify or declassify documents by thinking about it, could pressure state officials about elections, could do anything he deemed necessary in his role as president, and courts have been systematically rejecting that claim, saying presidential power has limits, saying there are laws and constitutional constraints, saying Trump exceeded his authority in multiple ways. The specific ruling about National Guard deployment in Portland establishes that one of those excesses was illegal. Trump apparently deployed National Guard forces to Portland during protests, used them for law enforcement purposes, did so without proper authorization under federal law. The judge reviewed the legal requirements for such deployments, reviewed what Trump actually did, and concluded the deployment violated federal law, was illegal. That specific finding is important because it's not just a policy disagreement, it's a judicial determination that Trump broke the law. The permanent injunction stopping such deployments prevents Trump from trying this again. Can't deploy forces to Portland or similar situations without following proper procedures. That injunction is a judicial order. Violating it would be contempt of court, would result in serious sanctions, including potential arrest. So Trump is legally bound not to repeat this illegal conduct. The stripping away of immunity arguments that this ruling represents is significant. Trump has been claiming that even if his conduct was questionable, he has immunity. Can't be prosecuted for official acts. Can't be sued for things done as president. But if the conduct was illegal, as the judge found the Portland deployment was, then immunity doesn't apply. You don't get immunity for illegal acts. So Trump's immunity defense collapses when courts find his conduct was illegal. The fabricated evidence Trump's lawyers presented apparently includes documents or testimony that turned out to be false. Maybe they claimed certain authorization existed when it didn't. Maybe they misrepresented what federal law allowed. Whatever the specific fabrications, the judge discovered them, found that Trump's team had presented false information. That's serious misconduct. That's potentially criminal, and it destroys the team's credibility. The inconsistent evidence refers to Trump's team saying one thing in one filing and something different in another, or presenting evidence that contradicts their own claims. That inconsistency shows either incompetence or dishonesty. Either they don't know what they're arguing, or they're deliberately trying to mislead the court. Neither is acceptable. Both destroy credibility. The threat of sanctions against Trump's lawyers is the judge's way of ensuring accountability. If lawyers present false evidence or make false arguments, they face sanctions, financial penalties, public reprimands. Those sanctions punish the misconduct and deter future violations. The possibility of disbarment is even more serious. That's loss of law license, end of legal career. State bars investigate when judges refer lawyers for misconduct, and presenting fabricated evidence is exactly the kind of conduct that results in disbarment. Trump's lawyers are facing career-ending consequences for their tactics. The potential for direct criminal consequences refers to the possibility that Trump himself could be prosecuted for the illegal National Guard deployment. If a court has found the deployment was illegal, prosecutors could use that finding to charge Trump with violating federal law, with exceeding his authority in ways that constitute crimes. That creates new criminal exposure beyond the cases Trump is already facing. The exhaustion of delay tactics means Trump has run out of ways to postpone accountability. Courts have seen all his maneuvers, have denied all his delay requests, are forcing cases to proceed to trial and sentencing. Trump can't delay anymore, has to face the legal process. The rejection of appeals shows even higher courts are declining to help Trump. When Trump appeals unfavorable rulings, appellate courts are affirming them, are saying the lower courts got it right. That consistent rejection across multiple levels of judiciary shows Trump's legal positions are fundamentally flawed. The prospect of criminal sentencing being weeks away in multiple cases creates urgency. Trump isn't facing distant theoretical consequences. He's facing imminent sentencing in cases where he's been convicted, and trials in cases where he's been indicted, all happening soon, all creating real possibility of jail time in the near future. The Supreme Court decisions limiting presidential immunity that contributed to this collapse include recent rulings clarifying that immunity only applies to official acts, that personal conduct and illegal conduct aren't covered. Those rulings undermined Trump's immunity defenses, made it easier for lower courts to reject his immunity claims. The setbacks at appellate level show Trump losing at every stage. District courts rule against him. He appeals. Appellate courts affirm. He tries to go to Supreme Court denies review. That consistent pattern of losses across all levels shows his legal positions are untenable. The ongoing congressional and criminal investigations adding pressure means Trump faces threats from multiple directions. Courts ruling against him, prosecutors investigating him, Congress considering impeachment, all of it creating comprehensive legal jeopardy. The impact on GOP strategies and political prospects refers to how these legal losses hurt Trump politically when courts keep finding he acted illegally, when his lawyers face sanctions, when he faces sentencing. That makes it harder for Republicans to support him, harder to claim he's being persecuted when courts keep finding he broke the law. Okay, so let's break down what this final defense collapse means for Trump's immediate legal future and for presidential accountability. Point 1. Judge finding National Guard deployment was illegal and issuing permanent injunction establishes precedent that presidential power has real limits that courts will enforce. Future presidents can't claim unlimited authority, can't deploy military forces illegally, have to follow federal law. That judicial enforcement of limits on presidential power is crucial for constitutional government. Point 2. The stripping away of Trump's core immunity argument across multiple cases leaves him without viable legal defense in most proceedings. If immunity doesn't apply because conduct was illegal or personal rather than official, then Trump has no defense, has to face trials and sentencing without the shield he was counting on. That makes conviction and consequences much more likely. Point 3. Lawyers being caught presenting fabricated and inconsistent evidence triggers sanctions and potential disbarment that will make it harder for Trump to find competent representation. Good lawyers won't want to represent Trump if it means risking their licenses. Trump will be left with desperate or incompetent lawyers, making his legal position even weaker. Point 4. The exhaustion of delay tactics and rejection of appeals means trials and sentencing will proceed on normal timelines without further postponement. Trump can't delay anymore, has to face justice now. That accelerated timeline increases his immediate legal jeopardy. Point 5. The characterization of this as historic turning point and new phase of vulnerability reflects that Trump's legal position has fundamentally shifted from potentially defensible to essentially indefensible. His final defenses have collapsed. His lawyers have lost credibility. His appeals have been rejected. He's out of options. So what's the bottom line? Trump's final defense collapsed. Judge Immergut ruled National Guard deployment illegal, issued permanent injunction, stripped away Trump's claims of unchecked executive power. That core defense theory Trump relied on across multiple cases now destroyed. Trump's team committing legal suicide through extreme arguments and fabricated evidence, losing credibility with judges, getting threatened with sanctions and disbarment, facing potential criminal consequences themselves. The scathing court remarks condemning Trump's legal positions and tactics, judge using strong language to criticize Trump's approach. That criticism becoming part of permanent record, influencing other judges. The warning of imminent sanctions, disbarments, criminal consequences creating panic among Trump's legal team lawyers, questioning whether representing Trump worth the risk. Some potentially leaving, others potentially flipping. Legal observers calling this historic turning point. Trump's delay tactics exhausted, appeals rejected, criminal sentencing potentially weeks away in multiple cases, all Trump's maneuvering failing, all his attempts to postpone accountability ending, the ruling expected to set precedent for presidential accountability, establishing that presidential power has limits, that courts will enforce those limits, that illegal conduct by presidents has consequences. The Supreme Court decisions limiting immunity, contributing to collapse, making clear immunity only for official acts, not for personal or illegal conduct, that narrow definition of immunity undermining all Trump's immunity defenses. The appellate setbacks showing Trump losing at every level, district courts, appeals courts, Supreme Court, consistent pattern of rejection across entire judiciary, congressional and criminal investigations adding pressure, multiple fronts of legal jeopardy, multiple threats Trump has to defend against simultaneously, impact on GOP strategies and political prospects, Trump's legal losses making Republican support harder, when courts keep finding illegal conduct, when lawyers face sanctions, when sentencing approaches, hard to claim persecution, hard to maintain support, the broader shakeup affecting everyone around Trump, lawyers facing professional consequences, associates facing legal jeopardy, political allies distancing themselves, all because Trump's legal defenses collapsed. Judge on verge of issuing devastating ruling after destroying final defenses, that imminent ruling expected to open way for criminal penalties for major civil liability, for comprehensive legal accountability, Trump's legal empire crumbling as defenses fail, as lawyers lose credibility, as courts reject his arguments, the fabricated evidence leading to possible career-ending consequences for attorneys, disbarment proceedings likely, sanctions certain, some lawyers potentially facing criminal charges for presenting false evidence. This marking new phase where Trump has no viable defenses left, has to face trials without immunity protection, has to face sentencing without delays, has to face accountability without the legal shields he was counting on. The final collapse being comprehensive, not one defense failing, but all defenses failing, not one case going badly, but multiple cases collapsing simultaneously. Trump's entire legal strategy proving to be built on false premises, on claims courts won't accept, on tactics that destroy credibility rather than build it. The devastating nature of imminent ruling being based on judges' findings. Trump acted illegally. His team presented false evidence. His claims of power are wrong. All of that creating record that prosecutors can use, that other courts will rely on. That establishes Trump's misconduct as judicially determined fact, the crumbling of Trump's legal empire being visible to everyone. Cases failing, lawyers leaving or facing sanctions, appeals being rejected, sentencing approaching, all creating picture of comprehensive legal collapse. This is what it looks like when all defenses fail, when tactics backfire, when credibility is destroyed, when courts unite in rejecting defendants' arguments. Trump facing this reality, his final defenses collapsed, his legal team in disarray, his options exhausted, nothing left but to face trials and sentencing, to accept accountability for illegal conduct, to experience consequences that have been building for years. Judge set to issue ruling that confirms all of this. that makes official what everyone can already see. Trump's legal defenses have failed. His attempt to avoid accountability has collapsed. Justice is coming whether he's ready or not.